Hello, everyone. I am going to be talking with y'all today about attention. So I'm going to share my screen for the attention PowerPoint. Here we are. Just going to minimize this if you can see it so that it's not in the way. And here we go. And if you hear some construction, I tried to find the quietest area of my house, but they're very loud. So hear that. Hopefully Zoom is doing a good job of muting the background here. All right. So we're going to be talking today about attention, and then we will finish up attention on Tuesday, most likely. All right. So starting with the filter models of attention, and then we'll go into attention as a limited resource, and then go into more of a divided attention, which is kind of part of that attention as a limited resource. And then we'll go into feature integration. And you'll see that it all kind of goes together in terms of attention. Alrighty, so for attention, it is the process of concentrating on these specific features of the environment or on certain thoughts or activities. And it is very selective. There's this selective attention, which we will look at quite a lot, including the excluding of other features of the environment. And then there's limited attention as well in capacity and timing. So there's a video that's called Whodunit, and if it is not posted on Canvas, I will post it on Canvas just in case it doesn't actually play the audio for you as I am playing it here. All right, here we go. Okay. You to miss something that you're not looking for. Oh yeah, on a busy road, this could be fatal. So good message there. Okay. Now, for selective attention, we tend to filter out some information and promote other information for further processing. Selective attention is this ability to focus on one message and ignore all the other messages. We don't attend to a large fraction of the information that is in the environment. So where in the process does this selection take place? Okay, so this is dichotic listening, otherwise known as a shadowing task. And what this is is it's able to, there's one message that is presented to the left ear and another is presented to the right ear. And participants shadow, which is why it's called a shadowing task, they shadow one message to ensure that they are attending to that message, such as what is happening at the left ear here. And the question is, can we completely filter out the message to the unattended ear and attend only to the shadowed message? So they will try to focus on the man then called out to Steve, and maybe Steve is the participant's name. And then they are ignoring the farmer walked over to the barn to investigate the noise. So what are the results from this study? We found that the things that were noticed were that the participants were able to notice when the voice changed in the left or the right ear. They noticed when the loudness changed, the volume, and when a beat was added to either side. But in the right side, when they were unattentive to that side, they were not able to notice when the content changed, what they were actually saying. They were not able to see and hear when the language changed, which is why I find that interesting, and when the speech was reversed completely. So they were successful at shadowing at a normal to a rapid rate, and they failed to notice some of the words in the list that they were given in a experiment that involved dichotic listening, even though the list might have been repeated 35 times. All right, so what we find from the results of dichotic listening were that they knew that there was a message. They knew the gender of the speaker, but they couldn't report the content of the message in the unattended ear. But the unattended ear is being processed at some sort of level, right? Because they knew there was a message and the gender. So there's this thing called the cocktail party effect. And what the cocktail party effect is you are able to focus on one conversation and tune out everything else. So when you're at a cocktail party, you might be talking to someone and you're listening to their conversation and you're able to tune out everything else that's going on. This happens a lot in restaurants as well. And you could also maybe see it at maybe a movie theater right before the film starts when everyone's talking, or right after when everyone's talking, especially at a Marvel movie. So a change in gender can be noticed in terms of like the voice, and a change to a tone is noticed as well. But where does that attention filter occur? In the brain, and where exactly through the attentional process does this attention filter occur? So this is what is known as Broadbent's filter model. So this was discussed before as an example of information processing, but now we're going to look at it in terms of attention. So this type of filter model can prevent us from an information overload. The early selection model is another way of phrasing Broadbent's filter model. So it filters these messages before incoming information is analyzed for the meaning. So start with the messages coming into us, and then we go into sensory memory, which holds all of that incoming information for a fraction of a second, and then it transfers all that information to the next stage, which is the filter stage, which then the filter identifies the attended message based on physical characteristics, and only the attended message is passed on to the next stage. So Then that attended message moves on to the detector. If I'm going too fast, you could just rewind me or slow me down somehow. That's the benefit of it being an online lecture this time. So the detector processes all of that information to determine higher level characteristics of the message, and then it moves on to the memory, specifically the short-term memory, which receives the output of the detector and holds information for 10 to 15 seconds, and it may transfer it to long-term memory. Okay. So the Broadbent's model could not actually explain that cocktail party effect that we discussed, where you're able to focus on one conversation and tune out everything else. It also could not explain the, or it can be how you can be trained to detect in the unattended ear. So participants can shadow these meaningful messages that switch from one ear to another, and only a limited amount of information can actually be attended to. Attention has a limited capacity, as these. There's more of a information bottleneck, if you will, that has to squeeze through in order for us to see what we're actually going to pay attention to. We can't pay attention to everything. And so this bottleneck occurs early in the processing, specifically the early selection models, which we just discussed. Only a small amount of information actually gets through. And this limited amount of information that's attended to has to happen before any meaning is actually determined from what information is getting through. So how does it do this? Well, there's this filtering based on physical properties of the information that you're hearing. And then there's also the problems with this, as we said, explaining the actual cocktail party effect. So then we go into this study by Gray and Whitburn from 1960 called Dear Aunt Jane. It's called that for a reason. So this is Dear Aunt Jane. These participants were only asked to listen to their left ear, this left ear here. And they should hear Dear 7 Jane, right? That's what the participants should hear, but they don't. They overwhelmingly reported that they heard Dear Aunt Jane, even though these are being reported in the, these are being given to them in the unattended ear. But they overwhelmingly hear Dear Aunt Jane, which shows that sometimes we process meaning before physical characteristics, even though we just discussed that physical characteristics are what is looked at most frequently. This was a problem for Broadbent's filter model. We also seem to pay more attention to words than numbers, as we can see with this Dear Aunt Jane study. So then we get to Treisman's attenuation theory. So Anne Treisman was actually a student of Broadbent, and she was able to add to it. So this attenuation theory is also called the leaky filter model of attention, L-E-A-K-Y, leaky filter model of attention. So it added the parts of Broadbent's model to include an attenuator and a dictionary unit. So once information hits the attenuator, it analyzes the information based on three things: physical characteristics, language, and meaning. However, processing in this case is hierarchical, meaning that language and meaning are only used if the physical characteristics are unclear. This is once again saying that physical characteristics are overarching over every other type of information that is coming in. So imagine the attenuator sort of like a volume knob, which can turn up the volume on certain stimuli and down on others. And everything is partially processed, but some may be at a lower volume. So only the attended material is elaborated on and remembered. So for example, it might be black cat meows loudly, right? Because that actually makes sense. That information in the environment coming in through our senses. And then it goes through the attenuator. And now we get to the dictionary unit. So after information is passed through that attenuator, otherwise known as that filter, goes into the leaky filter. It goes into the dictionary unit, where every word has a different threshold for being activated. And according to Treisman, if someone says our name in a conversation, we will barely hear it. Let's say that you're at this cocktail party, right? Not that you're talking directly to someone, but you happen to hear your name in a conversation. You'll actually barely hear your name because a small portion of that information passed through the attenuator. Then, since we realized it was important, like, hey, wait a minute, that's my name, then you turn your volume up and you're able to listen for that person's voice again to see if they were talking to us, talking about us, etc. So what information your brain is trying to figure out what information should actually be responded to. So it's able to use context, personal significance, like your name, and alert in order to determine if this should be used for the dictionary unit in this threshold, which is why black cat meows loudly goes through as opposed to March runs clock funny. All right, this attenuation theory actually gets refined later by the same researcher. All right, now that we've talked about the filter models of attention, let's look at attention as a limited resource. So that's looking at attention as a spotlight. So what is attention as a spotlight? What descriptions of attention have helped researchers study attention? The consciousness is shifted by internal or external cues, which could be described as the salience in the world. And studies end up showing faster response times when the attention is directed toward information. So this is LaBerge's experiment from 1983. And in the first task, they asked them if the center letter is between A and G, right? So they're looking in the center here. They see that it's R. It's not in the center letter, but that's not really what they were wanting them to do. They wanted them to have their attention based on the center here. And so even though there's 3 screens showing here, these were all separate screens shown to the participants. And so in the second task, they ask, is target number 7 present? And so they're much faster at getting it when the 7 is in the center here, as opposed to being slightly off or really far off from center. So task 1 ends up priming you for task 2 to focus your attention on the center of the screen by measuring how quickly you identify whether the 7 is present or not. So these are the results of that study. And so the reaction time for when the 7 is in the center is much lower than when it's in the 2nd or 4th position, and even more so than when it's in the 1st or 5th position. But other studies suggest that this spotlight might be more distributed than initially thought from this study. So it's still an open question. Then we get to divided attention. So attention is still a limited resource here. Attention can be seen as a mental capacity. And Kahneman from 1973 said that there's this, you can allocate your attention to different tasks based on our intentions, which looked at dual task or divided attention methods. And this related to cognitive resources and how much mental effort a task actually takes. Kahneman also said that that relates to arousal and alertness. So let's keep going. So this is looking at the divided attention method. So you have this 100-car naturalistic driving study, right? So there's a naturalistic means that it's actually happening in the environment. And what they were able to find was that the video recorders were placed in the cars, and the risk of accident ended up being 4 times higher when using a cell phone. So another study looked at divided attention, and they had a simulated driving task. And participants on the cell phone ended up missing twice as many red lights and took longer to apply the brakes. And that same result actually occurred for when they were using the hands-free cell phone as opposed to the cell phone being held up to your ear. So they compared listening, which in this case was the radio, versus a cell phone conversation. They found that conversation it impaired their driving. Additional studies found that did similar things. These additional studies found no impairment with shadowing, and there was a similar impairment with the hands-free conversation, which I stated here. So that is the same for actual driving, and hearing half of a conversation is apparently worse than talking with someone in the car, like someone that's actually riding with you in the car. And cell phone and instant message conversations also can impair exam studying, just to let you know, for another example of a different type of task and how the attention is divided there. All right, so these are the results from this study. And what they found is when they're doing a single task versus a dual task, meaning talking on the phone versus just driving, the probability of a miss, which, mind you, a miss is when they are missing red light. So they had about 70% probability of a missing of a red light when they were doing more than one task versus the single task. And then radio was less so, but still kind of up there. And then you get into the average reaction time, which is quite a long time for the dual task compared to the single task. And then the radio, there's no significance there between single task and dual task. If you all know error bars, the error bar goes past it. So that means that there's no significance there. Same thing here with this. So that's what we're looking at there. So many think that you might be safe while you're driving while you're talking, but 45% report having been hit or nearly hit by someone talking on the phone, 45% of individuals. All right, then we get into feature integration. So this is the binding problem. So how do we know that this is a red circle and this is a blue square, not a blue circle and a red square? So this looks at Treisman once again, who I mentioned, and this is her refining her theory, which I said we would get to. So this is her in 1986 coming up with the feature integration theory. So this is the feature integration theory. You start with an object, and then you get into the pre-attentive stage, which is automatic. There's no effort or attention here. This is pre-attentive, and you're unaware of your processes, and the object is analyzed into features. So the objects are analyzed into features in their pre-attentive stage, and then the features are combined later with the aid of attention. So then in the focused attention stage, the attention plays a key role and the features are combined. And then that moves on into perception. So let's look at an example here. So we have a scene in the environment, and this is more of a just the object. And then we get into the pre-attentive stage, being able to automatically identify some features in the scene, such as the baseball player with the helmet on, the catcher, the hand of the baseball player, the umpire arm and his signal here, the baseball, the field. What we were able to then combine these features to indicate that the runner is safe. So that is the feature integration model there. So this would be the actual perception part of the feature integration theory. So there's some supporting evidence for this. As you can see, Treisman's all over this particular lecture. With this, the blue T and the S pop out no matter how many distractors there are. So if the target is the blue letter or the target is the S, you can see it very easily. Here's the blue T, here's the blue T, here's the S, here's the S. This is 5 items, this is 15 items. But then when you get to the green T, it might be easy to spot it with only 5, but then it takes maybe a minute to find the green T here in the 15 item display. So when we need to combine features, performing a conjunctive search, the number of distractors ends up mattering. And when you are actually analyzing something like when you're driving, for instance, that what you're trying to find might be kind of hard to find amongst a lot of different things when you were maybe looking down at your phone and then you're having to survey a whole new environment that you have looked up to. And now what we're going to do is play a little game. So there's going to be a brief flash where you're going to try to remember the numbers that you see on the screen. Those that were there on Thursday would know that this might or might not work. So we're going to see if this works or not. All right, you're ready? We're going to try to remember the numbers that you see on the screen from a brief flash. Ready? Go. All right, it worked. So what numbers did you see? You can think to yourself. What objects were in the center? Was there a red circle? Was there a green triangle? Don't rewind and cheat. Okay. So here's the image. You have a 1, there's an 8, there's a yellow circle, no red circle, and there is a green half circle, I guess you call it. Not a green triangle. There's a red triangle and a blue triangle. And so these might have been the illusory conjunctions, taking this red triangle and this yellow circle to make you think that there was a red circle there, and the green triangle from the green circle and the blue triangle to make you think that there was a green triangle here. So this is part of the feature integration theory, where participants reported a combination of features from different stimuli, and these illusory conjunctions down here at the bottom occur because the features are free floating, because you're not studying that much, you just looked at it at a glance, right? Continuing with the feature integration theory, you might tend to ignore the black numbers and focus on the objects, and participants can usually correctly pair the shapes with and the colors. The feature integration theory is mostly bottom-up processing, since you're taking these different parts of a item and then using your knowledge to say, okay, this was a red circle. Top-down processing can influence the processing that you're going through when participants are told what they would see, such as maybe the numbers. Top-down processing also combines with feature analysis to help one perceive things accurately. So what do you see here? On the left, what do you see? If you had to think of an item or an object, not just orange triangle, right? Go a little bit deeper into your knowledge into guessing what it might be. Did any of you say carrot? So it's supposed to be a carrot. In the middle here, you have a blue oval, but what would you consider this perhaps as an object? It's supposed to be a pool, actually. That's why it's blue. All right. And the last one here, you had to put this object into your memory banks. What would you recognize this object as? This is a tire, actually. So tire for a car or a wheelbarrow, perhaps. So top-down processing can actually help reduce these illusory conjunctions that we just. Now we go to attention as a feature binder. So it is consistent with the brain localization of function. The components of these of the theory match with the activities in the occipital, parietal, and the temporal lobes. And then these researchers in 2013 looked at the difference between a local versus a global feature movement. If you don't know what those are, I'm about to explain it. So on the left is a local feature movement, and on the right is a global feature movement. So we're looking at how do researchers study what someone is and isn't paying attention to. So they stare at this red dot in the middle, and the participants were asked to indicate whether they see dots moving on their own or all of the dots moving. So take a second to just look at the red dot in the middle, try to just focus your eyes on it and see if you see the dots the other places moving or not, and seeing if they are actually moving the direction that it's indicating. So take a second. It's easier obviously on the left side. So go ahead. So that might be the local. And then with the global movement, the local movement is saying that each dot is moving on its own, or the global movement is that the dots are all moving together around the entire screen. So if you didn't see this, maybe get even closer to that red dot and really focus on that. And what they find for the brain activity data from this study is that there's more activity in the right parietal cortex, which they're indicating based on the arrows, for the global condition when this attention binding is required. So the activity shown represents the activity present in the global conditions that was not present in the local conditions for 3 subjects. Here, here, and here. That's why it says global over local. So a lot of activity in this parietal cortex compared to the for the global conditions as opposed to the local conditions. And that's all we got for today. That's attention. So the study of attention can be viewed as a filter, a limited resource, a spotlight, and even a feature binder. The models of selective attention propose that information is filtered at different points, and the feature integration theory proposes a model of how we integrate features of that object. So there are some videos up there for y'all to watch. Some of them are focused on next Tuesday. So if it looks like the title of a video doesn't match with any of the slides on Canvas, then it's probably for the next day as opposed to this lecture. So you can hold off on those if you'd like, or you can watch them beforehand, to you. But yes, for example, like inattentional blindness, we'll look at that more next time. Alrighty, and that's all we got for attention. I hope y'all hope y'all were able to learn some. And that's all I got. I'll see y'all next Tuesday. All right. Bye.